Great courage in times of crisis. And the key text, before I begin, I would like to just offer a word of prayer. Memory text is taken from Isaiah chapter 54. Isaiah chapter 54 and verse 17. And it says, "No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is of me, said the Lord." What is the heritage that the Bible is talking about? In the New Living Translation Bible, put it slightly different, but it's the same meaning. The New Living Translation Bible says, "But in that coming day, no weapon turned against you will succeed. You will silence every voice raised up to accuse you. These benefits are enjoyed by the servants of the Lord. Their vindication will come from me. I, the Lord, have spoken." In every age, there have been great leaders who emerged in a time of real crisis and did extraordinary things and exercised great wisdom and intelligence to deal with all kinds of crises. But one of the fundamental characteristics of a leader is their courage to take a firm stand and their willingness to take bold action in times of real crisis, regardless of the consequences. They take big steps and gamble at the risk of succeeding or failing. Former First Lady Michelle Obama once said in her address to the nation, when President Obama was running for re-election, she said that the presidency does not make you who you are, but rather it reveals who you are. And time again, we have seen these characteristics on display from leaders everywhere, in every age. On January the 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln ended slavery when he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, thereby freeing all the slaves throughout the United States of America. He knew that the South would put up a strong resistance to the freeing of the slaves, at the risk of breaking up the whole Union. Nevertheless, he took a firm stand against enslavement of blacks and had the courage to issue the Emancipation Proclamation and end slavery in the United States of America. This would eventually cost him his life. Nevertheless, he had the courage to do what was right and bring about a positive change in the nation. This is the courage that so many patriarchs and prophets possessed when they had to take bold action in a time of crisis. This is the courage that the Apostle Paul and all the other disciples possessed in the face of persecution and resistance. This is the kind of courage Stephen possessed while he was being stoned to death. This is the kind of courage that all those early reformers possessed, including the Waldenses, Martin Luther, John Wycliffe, John Huss, and Jerome. These humble servants of God had the courage to take a firm stand against the false religious system of the papacy. And as a result, they felt the wrath of the papacy. Many gave their lives as martyrs for the cause of the truth. This is the kind of courage that the servants of God must possess in these last days as we see the day fast approaching. In the Bible, there is one person, one of many persons, that is mentioned that possess that level of courage to the degree that attract huge admiration. That person I'm speaking about is Queen Esther. She became the queen to King Ahasuerus, king of the Medes and the Persians. Now, I want to give you a brief history of Esther and how she became the queen. Because she wasn't born as the queen, but she ascended to the queenship. But how? Who was Esther? Who was her parents? King Ahasuerus was the king of the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. This kingdom was huge and occupied a large territory. King Ahasuerus reigned over 127 provinces, which spanned across 2 continents between Asia and Africa, from India all the way to Ethiopia. In the 3rd year of his reign, King Ahasuerus called a great feast while he sat on his throne in his kingdom in Shushan, his palace. So he invited all his servants and the princes and the nobles of all the provinces. He showed them the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty, which lasted 180 days. That's 180 days, or over 6 months and about 5 days, somewhere thereabout, if you know math. At the end of the 180 days, the king made a feast for all the people in attendance at the palace of Shushan, both great and small. For 7 days, these dignitaries and high profile people with the servants were in the courts of the garden of the king's palace, eating and drinking out of vessels made of gold. Vashti, who was the queen at that time, also held a feast for the women in the royal house of King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the king's heart was merry with wine, he commanded 7 of his chamberlains or his hired servants to bring Vashti, the queen, with the royal crown, to show the people and the princes her beauty. And I could imagine Vashti was a very beautiful queen. Nice long hair, beautiful, Because, you see, she was very beautiful and fair to look upon. But the Queen Vashti, the king sent these servants to bring her, to show her to his guest. But the Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command by his servants. Therefore, the king became very wroth, and his anger burned within him. One of the king's princes advised him to find another queen and give Vashti royal estate to another queen who would respect him and obey his command, and it pleased the king, and he decided to do just that. So the king appointed officers throughout all the provinces of his kingdom to gather all the fair young virgins at the palace. So they rounded up all the virgins and passed them through a purification process. After they stood before the king, King Ahasuerus chose Esther to be his new queen. She was very young and beautiful and attractive and fair to look upon. Both of Esther's parents died, and her uncle Mordecai is her father's brother, who took care of her and brought her up like his own daughter. Mordecai and Esther were two of many Jews that were taken into captivity by King Nebuchadnezzar during the siege of Jerusalem. And he presented her as one of the virgins. Every day he would go back and forth at the palace, checking on her while she was going through the purification process. He treated her like his own daughter. Now the king promoted Haman above all the princesses of his kingdom. And Haman became a very important man to the king Ahasuerus. But Haman's heart was evil. Because of how high and exalted his position was, all the king's servants that were at the king's gate bowed to him. But Mordecai would not bow, nor did he reverence him. God's people don't bow to idols. God's people don't bow to anyone. So Mordecai refused to bow. The king's servants at the gate asked him, "Why are you transgressing the king's command? Why are you not bowing? Why are you not reverencing this man, this great man, whom the king exalted?" And they made it known unto Haman, the king's right-hand man. Haman, upon hearing this, became very angry against Mordecai and all the Jews. And what did he do? Haman went to King Ahasuerus and told him what's going on with the Jewish man called Mordecai. In the book of Esther, Esther chapter 3. Esther chapter 3 from verse 3 from verse 8 to 10. Esther chapter 3 from verse 8 to 10 says, And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all the people. Neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore, it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business, to bring it into the king's treasuries. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And if we go on to verse 13 and 14, says, And the letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. The copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. So the stage was set to destroy all of God's people in one day. What did Esther do about the plot? First of all, Esther did not panic. Upon hearing this, Esther started to fast and pray. And she sent a message to Haman, not to Mordecai, sorry, to tell him to fast and pray for 3 days. Get a message out to all the Jewish people in the kingdom to fast and pray for 3 days. Because this is serious. In the book of Esther, chapter 4, verses 15 to 17. Then Esther bade them return to Mordecai this answer. Go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat or drink 3 days, night or day. And I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Now in those days, if you go into the king and you're not called to see the king, they would put you to death. And if the king chooses not to let you die, he would stretch out his sickle to you. And Esther knew this is what she was facing. What if she goes to the king and the king do not stretch his sickle out to her? That means she's bound for death. But Esther didn't care. She risked it all. She had the courage to approach the king in the face of death. Esther then went into the king, risking her own life, and invited him and Haman to a banquet. When the king and Haman came to the banquet, Esther revealed the evil plot of Haman to the king. In the book of Esther, chapter 7, verse 7 to 10. Verse 7, chapter 7, and verse 7 to 10. And it says, and the king arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath went into the palace garden, and Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther, the queen. For he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine. And Haman was fallen upon the bed wherein Esther was. Then said the king, will ye force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Arabona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold, also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. So do we understand what happened there? Haman set a trap for Mordecai to have him hanged. And the same trap he set for Mordecai, he fell in the trap. There's an old saying that says, when you dig a hole for your neighbor, make sure you dig one for yourself. Because chances are you might fall in the same hole. When you are setting a trap for your neighbor, set one for yourself too, because you might fall into that same trap that you devised for your neighbor. As in the case of Haman, the Agagite, and the enemy of the Jews. The same gallows he made to have Mordecai hanged, he was hanged on it instead. Isaiah 54, verse 17 says, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is of me, saith the Lord. It didn't finish there. Esther went again before the king. In the book of Esther, chapter 8, verses 3 to 6. And it says, and Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. Esther arose and stood before the king, and said, if it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my people? In verse 7 says, then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen, unto Mordecai the Jew, behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he had laid his hands upon the Jews. So, Haman died, but the decree was still there. to slay the Jews in one single day. So Esther went back went again before the king and said, you know, I can't live happy knowing and seeing my people get slaughtered. So could you reverse this decree? Reversed it. Mordecai became a feared man throughout the province. And Esther chapter 9, verse 5 and 6. Esther chapter 9, verse 5 and 6 says, thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And verse 6 says, and in Shushan, the palace, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. Verse 13 to 14 says, then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. And the king commanded it so to be done. And the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. So everything backfired on Haman. He was planting evil against the people of God, and it all backfired on him. He was hanged, now his 10 sons was hanged. What's the meaning of this? In verse 16 to 17, same chapter 9, says, but the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 75,000, but they laid not their hands on the prey. On the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day of the same rested day, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. So the same day that this decree went into effect to slay the people of God, a particular day, one day, instead, it was reversed. And the people of God, the children of Israel, slay their enemies one day, 75,000 people at Shushan. Over 75,000 people. I want to say to you today that history will repeat itself in these last days. In one night, the wicked will make a decree to destroy us and rid the earth of us. They will blame us, the Sabbath keepers, for all the troubles that will be coming upon the earth. We will be the only company that stand in defiance of the beast and his image. That day is coming. And times are only getting worse as we see the day fast approaching. Everything is getting difficult. Look around you. It is getting increasingly difficult for God's people. Almost everywhere you go for a job now, they're telling you have to work Sabbaths. It's getting difficult. And trouble will be coming up on this earth. And they will blame us. It is because we are not keeping the holy day. And we didn't receive the mark of the beast. And they were planning, make a decree to get rid of us in one single day. But what will happen? Would God allow that to happen? In the book of Daniel, chapter 12, and verse 1. And what did it say? And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which stand for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at the time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. In the book of Psalms, chapter 34. The book of Psalms, chapter 34 and verse 7. What did it say? It says, the angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him, and delivered them. In the book of Acts of the Apostles, page 444. And it says, at midnight, God manifests his power for the deliverance of his people. The sun appears shining in its strength. Signs and wonders follow. The wicked look with terror on the scene, while the righteous behold the tokens of their deliverance. In the midst of the angry heavens is one clear space of indescribable glory, whence comes the voice of God, like the sound of many waters, saying, it is done. At midnight, the sun will shine. At midnight, the sun will come out and shine when the wicked try to destroy God's people. And they will be struck with terror to see the glory of God being manifested. What's going on? In the book of great controversy, page 652. And it says, it will be seen that who is infinite in wisdom will devise no plan for our salvation except the sacrifice of his son. The compensation for this sacrifice is the joy of peopling the earth with ransom beings, holy, happy, and immortal. The result of the Savior's conflict with the powers of darkness is joy to the redeemed, redounding to the glory of God throughout eternity. And such is the value of the soul that the Father is satisfied with the price paid. And Christ himself, beholding the fruits of his great sacrifice, is satisfied. The question is, which company will we be in when that time comes? The decision that we make from day to day, the life that we choose to live today, will determine whether we will be numbered among the wicked or numbered among the righteous. It is my hope and wish and my prayer that each of us, when that time comes, our names will be found written in the Lamb's Book of Life, and so that when Jesus comes, we will have a place in his eternal kingdom. Amen.
We thank God for the message that we received this morning. We're going to close the service now by singing hymn number 386. Hymn number 386. We will stand at the sound of the music.